The insult hit harder than the sound of the plate he had just shoved away. "Can't even write down an order right, can you?" The words came out sharp, meant to cut. He didn't lower his voice. In fact, he pushed it louder, as if every set of ears in the diner was his audience. The room froze in a way that only small-town spaces can. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Conversations cut mid-sentence. Even the soft hum of the jukebox in the corner seemed too loud now. The young waitress stood rooted to the spot, the order pad trembling in her hand. A girl barely out of her teens, hair tied back in a messy bun, apron smudged from a busy lunch shift. Her eyes glistened, not from anger, but from the effort of holding everything back. Tears, humiliation, the sharp sting of being called out in front of strangers. The man in the tailored suit wasn't from around here. You could tell by the cut of the jacket, the sheen of the tie, the watch that flashed as he gestured. His kind didn't belong in this sun-baked Texas town where boots outnumbered polished shoes 10-1. Maybe that was the point. He wanted them to know he was different, above. He plucked the napkin from his lap, balled it in his fist, and dropped it to the floor like it carried disease. Then, slow enough for everyone to follow, he kicked it aside with the edge of his shoe. "This is what passes for service?" he said. Pathetic. A woman at the next booth shook her head, whispering to her husband, but she didn't speak up. Two truckers at the counter exchanged looks, the kind that said they'd seen worse, but neither moved. In rooms like this, people often calculate risk before conscience. The waitress bent slightly, as if to retrieve the napkin, then stopped. Pride kept her upright, but it cost her. Her knuckles whitened around the pencil. Her lips pressed together so tightly they lost color. The man wasn't finished. He leaned back in his chair, spreading one arm across the booth, as if he owned not just the seat, but the entire room. His voice rose again. "A place like this, you'd think they'd hire someone who can tell the difference between medium rare and well done. But no, give a girl a pad and a pen, and suddenly she thinks she's working." He laughed at his own joke, head thrown back just enough to show confidence was part of the performance. The sound was harsh, jagged, bouncing off the tiled floor and chrome fixtures. The diner's mood shifted. What had been cozy, the smell of coffee, the sizzle from the kitchen, sunlight filtering through faded blinds, now felt tense, claustrophobic. Customers glanced down at their plates, embarrassed for her. A child tugged at his mother's sleeve and whispered, "Why's he being mean?" but got no answer. The waitress tried to answer, her voice a whisper dragged up from somewhere deeper than her lungs. "Please, don't speak to me like that." He cut her off with another sharp laugh, louder this time, forcing the room to share in the humiliation. "Oh, she talks back. Maybe next she'll want a raise. Or maybe she'll want me to sign her autograph book. Is that it?" He leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes glittering with cruelty. "Honey, you're lucky to have a job cleaning tables." Her face burned. She swallowed hard, throat tight, chest rising fast, but still she stood there, refusing to run. And then something changed. A scrape of a chair in the back. Subtle, but in the silence it sounded like a crack of thunder. Heads turned. Near the far wall, where the light didn't reach as strongly, a man was rising slowly from his seat. Not loud, not rushed. Just steady. His movement drew more attention than any shout could have. A pair of old boots touched down on the linoleum, weight shifting with quiet certainty. The waitress blinked, distracted for the first time from the man in the suit. Relief flickered across her face, though she didn't know why. The suited man noticed the shift in attention. His smirk wavered, only for a second before snapping back. He craned his neck toward the rear of the diner, irritation flashing. "Oh, what now?" he said, chuckling under his breath. But the chuckle didn't carry. Every customer, every set of eyes, had turned toward that single movement in the back. Even the cooks in the kitchen leaned forward to see through the pass window. The air was thicker than the smell of coffee and fried onions. The waitress held her breath. She didn't know who was about to stand, but she felt something. An energy shifting, like the moment right before a storm hits, and the air presses down heavy on your skin. The man in the suit straightened in his booth, suddenly aware of the spotlight no longer belonging to him. He reached for his glass of water, took a sip, then set it down harder than he meant to. The scrape of boots across the floor drew closer, and the entire room waited to see who had decided enough was enough. Just wondering, where are you watching from? Write it down. Bellow. The boots reached the counter first. Then the rest of him came into view. Denim jacket, soft with age, gray at the temples, a face cut by weather rather than makeup. He didn't hurry. He set a couple dollar bills under his coffee mug like a man paying for time as much as caffeine, then turned toward the booth with the suit. Nothing about him asked for attention. The room gave it anyway. "Hey," the waitress said, barely audible, as if speaking might jinx the help she hadn't asked for. Her order pad trembled once, then stilled. The man in the suit smirked at the newcomer the way a dog bares teeth at a stranger walking by a yard. "You lost, old-timer?" he asked, voice pitched for the room. "Counter's that way." No one laughed. A fork clinked against a plate and didn't move again. From the kitchen window, a cook leaned on his forearms, face unreadable. A couple at the corner booth slid their phones lower, screens ready but shamed by their own curiosity. "Sir," the waitress tried, softer now. "It's okay. I can handle—" "You're handling it great," the suit cut in, not looking at her. "Getting my order wrong and crying about it." The denim jacket stopped an arm's length from the booth. He didn't square his shoulders or take a stance. He stood as if he'd been born in that exact spot, and the building had settled around him. Up close, the details sharpened. The creases at the eyes, the calm that isn't performance. The way his hands hung open as if they had better things to do than make fists. "Don't talk to her like that," he said. The words weren't loud. They landed anyway. The suit let out a little laugh that didn't travel. "And who are you supposed to be? Her union rep?" He flicked 2 fingers at the spilled napkin. "Tell you what, hero, why don't you pick that up? Be useful." A murmur started in the far booths, the sound you get when a weather front arrives and every body in a room registers it at once. The truckers at the counter turned on their stools a few inches, not enough to declare allegiance, enough to count range. A kid stood on his seat until his mother's hand eased him back down without taking her eyes off the men. Denham's gaze stayed on the suit. "Say you're sorry," he told him, tone so ordinary it felt like an instruction on how to buckle a seatbelt. "Then we're done." The waitress flinched like she'd been struck by the word sorry. She shook her head once, pleading, not to him but to the moment. "Please, don't—" The suit sat up straighter, that watch face flashing as his wrist moved. "Sorry?" he grinned. "To who?" "To the help? Listen, pal, I've eaten in places where the staff knows the difference between medium rare and leather. If this girl wants respect, she can start by—" "Enough," Denham said. Not a shout, not a sermon. A period. The room tightened. Even the jukebox's low, endless buzz seemed to bow its head. The man in the suit felt it, the way animals feel a pressure change. He wet his lips, a quick flick of tongue to corner, then tried to make the air his again. "Okay," he said, spreading his hands, voice growing theatrical. "Let's all relax. Why don't you go sit back down, Grandpa, before you tip over? I'm just teaching her how the world works." His smile thinned. "You don't like lessons?" He stood. Not fast. He made a show of unfolding from the booth, shoulders broad under expensive wool, the jacket sliding back to show the line of a gym body paid for in monthly installments. He stepped into Denham's space, like someone trying to see how much the world will give if he leans. Phones rose a little higher. The cook in the window muttered, "Aw, hell," and reached for a towel as if to have something in his hands made him useful. The waitress took a small step to the side, clutching the pad to her chest, as if it could shield her. "Sir," she whispered to Denham, "please, it's not worth it." He turned his head just enough to meet her eyes. "It is," he said, and the steadiness in it pulled a wire taut in every spine within earshot. The suit's laugh came back, high and thin. "I know you," he said suddenly, as if a delayed bulb had sputtered on. "You're that guy, right? The memes, the beard, internet tough guy. What's the line? The jokes?" He chuckled, louder now that he thought he'd found footing. "You don't scare me, man." Denham didn't answer to a name. He didn't answer at all. He watched the other man's shoulders, not his mouth. He waited, patient in a way that didn't read as patience until you were standing inside it. The suit wagged a finger toward the waitress like a magistrate handing down sentence. "You apologize to me for ruining my lunch." He looked back to Denham, eyes bright with the show. "And you, mind your business." "That is my business," Denham said simply. "Say you're sorry to her." Something quiet broke in the room. A woman at the window seat blinked against sudden tears she didn't understand. One of the truckers set his coffee down so gently the cup didn't clink. The suit's jaw moved side to side, the jawline workout heroes do in elevators when no one's watching. "Or what?" he asked, stepping closer. "You going to hit me? In front of witnesses?" He smiled again, relieved to hear himself still sounding like the loudest thing in the room. "Go ahead. Make my—" Denham took a single step and erased the space between them. He didn't lean. He didn't posture. The move was so clean that the air seemed to fold around it. The waitress whispered, "Please," so softly the word barely had sound. Her eyes were wide and glassy, not for herself anymore, but because she could feel the moment deciding what kind of day it wanted to become. The suit reached out. Not a punch, not yet. A shove. The kind of entitled contact men use when they're used to rooms parting for them. His palm came forward, flat, aimed at Denham's shoulder, a push to claim the square of floor under another man's boots. And the phones went higher. Somewhere by the door, a bell jingled as a delivery boy opened it a crack and then stopped, caught by the sight line of 100 heads facing one point. Denham's hands didn't lift. His posture didn't change. The tiniest shift ran through him, ankle, hip, breath, and the room seemed to tip toward a different outcome. "You sure?" he asked the suit, not as a threat, as a last little mercy. The suit didn't hear the gift inside the question. He moved his hand anyway. He moved it faster. Every fork in the diner hovered an inch above its plate. Every grip on every phone tightened. The cook leaned farther over the pass, towel twisted in his fist. The waitress squeezed her eyes shut for a heartbeat and opened them again. And the hand kept coming. The hand kept coming, palm flat, the kind of shove men use when they're used to clearing space by force. It cut the air between them, certain it would land. The room felt it too. Every fork paused, every breath cinched tight. "Apologize to her," the man in denim said. The words weren't loud, but they dropped into the silence like a stone into still water. The suited man's grin widened, brittle around the edges. He drove his hand forward that last inch, expecting impact, expecting victory. It never landed. Denham shifted just enough, an almost invisible angle of shoulder and hip. 2 fingers touched the back of the wrist, redirecting it as if turning a doorknob. The motion was so small, so efficient, that the shove dissolved into air. Momentum betrayed the suit, pulling him half a step off balance. Gasps snapped through the diner like popcorn in a skillet. A trucker muttered, "Hell," under his breath. The waitress clutched her order pad so tightly it bent against her chest. The suited man caught himself, straightened quickly, laughed too loud. "Nice trick," he said, brushing his jacket sleeve as if to wipe away the failure. "Do that again when it matters." Nobody laughed. Phones tilted higher. The cook leaned out through the pass window, towel twisting between his hands. The man in denim didn't move closer, didn't even square his stance. "Say you're sorry," he told him, same tone as before, plain, unshaken. The waitress whispered, "Please, don't." Her voice cracked on the word please. She wasn't pleading with the stranger anymore. She was pleading with the moment itself. The suit's jaw tightened. He spread his hands toward the room. "Folks, we've all had bad service, right? That's all this is. He's blowing it out of proportion." Not one head nodded. The diner had turned into something heavier than an audience. Witnesses. The suit turned back, eyes narrowing. "What are you, her bodyguard?" "Her dad?" He stepped closer, voice dropping into a low challenge. "Or what? You going to hit me? In front of everyone?" "No," Denham said. "I'll stop you." The words weren't a threat. They were a forecast. The suited man twitched, a half-second tell before movement. Denham saw it before it finished forming. The lunge came, both hands pushing hard, a shove meant to rattle teeth. It didn't find its mark. Denham's palms met the wrists, turned them a degree offline. Not blocked, not slammed, just guided. The suit's elbows folded wrong. His shoulders tipped forward. His own momentum sent him stumbling sideways into the booth. Not a fall, not a crash, just enough to leave him standing in the wreckage of his own confidence. The diner stayed deadly quiet. No laughter, no chatter. Only the sound of his shoes scuffing against linoleum as he caught balance. His face drained color. He looked at Denham and saw, finally, that noise wouldn't save him here. The waitress's eyes told him the same. No fear left in them now, only disappointment. Denham's voice broke the silence again, steady as before. "Last time. Apologize." The suited man's throat worked. He glanced at the phones, at the cook, at the boy peeking over the booth with wide eyes. He swallowed words sharp enough to cut his tongue. "You're all ridiculous," he muttered, brittle. "This place is ridiculous." "Maybe," Denham said, "but not wrong." The line landed heavier than a strike. People shifted in their seats, not from fear, but from recognition. The waitress closed her order pad with a snap that seemed final, holding it against her apron like a shield she no longer needed. The suit tried to smile again. His lips stretched, but no teeth showed. His shoulders rolled once, a nervous earthquake. He opened his mouth. And then, from behind the counter, the owner's voice cut across the silence. "Son, listen." It wasn't who anyone expected to speak, but the whole room turned, because maybe it was exactly who the moment needed. The owner's voice cut through the silence, steady, but worn. "Son, listen." It wasn't anger, not even command. It was the sound of someone who'd seen too many fights grow teeth when they didn't have to. The suited man gave a half-turn toward the counter, smirk curling as if to show he wasn't rattled. "I'm listening," he said, tossing the words like scraps. All I hear is whining. Then he pivoted back, hand shooting forward in a shove meant to erase the denim figure in front of him. It stopped cold, not with noise, not with effort. Chuck's palm rose barely an inch, fingertips brushing the man's forearm with a softness that mocked the violence behind it. The momentum died in his grip like water hitting dry sand. For a second, the suited man's wrist simply hung there, denied. The room gasped as one organism. Someone whispered, "That's Norris," and the name slipped from mouth to mouth like contraband, growing louder with every repeat. The waitress blinked hard, not sure if she'd misheard. Phones tilted higher, the glow of their screens throwing pale light across wide-eyed faces. The suit blinked too, then pasted on his grin again. "Cute," he said, the word forced. His voice tried to rise but had fewer steps than before. "You think that scares me?" Chuck didn't answer. His stillness did. The waitress pressed her order pad tighter to her chest, feeling the pulse in her wrists. She didn't understand what she was watching, only that her fear had moved from herself to the larger shape filling the room. She caught the owner's eyes over the counter. He shook his head once. "Don't move. Don't interrupt." The suited man filled the silence with his own noise. "What? Too scared to talk? Who even are you, old man? Some washed-up movie extra? Think those stories still work here?" His laugh landed sharp, but cracked halfway. "This is real life." No one in the diner moved. The silence wasn't passive anymore. It was pressure. Chuck's gaze didn't shift. His breathing stayed even, almost audible in the stillness. He didn't need words. The absence of them was heavier than anything the suit could spit out. The man flushed darker, unsettled by the weight pressing against him. He bumped Chuck's shoulder with his own, testing, daring. But the body in front of him gave no more than a fence post, sunk in concrete. He had pressed against something immovable, and it registered in his bones before it reached his brain. "Fine," he said, voice pitching higher. "We'll do it your way." He reached again, faster this time, arm snapping forward like it had before. It ended the same way. Chuck's palm caught the wrist, turned it a fraction, and the shove folded into emptiness. The suited man stumbled sideways into the edge of the booth. He didn't fall, but catching himself was worse. It made the failure obvious, undeniable. A kid at the window booth whispered, "Whoa!" before clapping a hand over his own mouth. Murmurs rose, soft currents swirling through the diner. The name passed again. Norris. Recognition settled. Relief, too. The crowd was no longer wondering if. They were realizing who. The suited man straightened, brushing at his jacket, jaw tight. His voice cracked. "You don't scare me," he said, but this time he spoke to the phones. He jabbed a finger at Chuck. "Keep filming." "You're all witnesses." "We are," a voice near the counter answered, and it wasn't the reassurance he wanted. The waitress shifted, shaky but steady enough to speak. "Sir, you could just sit back down. I'll fix your order. Please." He ignored her. His pride had locked all exits. Chuck glanced once at the order pad against her chest, then back to the man. "Last chance," he said. Nothing extra. Just a line. The suited man barked a laugh, thin and high. "Or what? You going to hit me? Go on. Do something." He leaned in close, his breath sour with coffee gone cold. "Make it count." The tension spiked, humming in the walls. Every phone in the diner steadied, every hand clenched on glass. A woman near the door whispered, "Don't," but it was swallowed by the quiet storm. Chuck didn't move. Restraint itself became the spectacle. The longer he stood silent, the more obvious it became who controlled the room. The man snapped. Rage overtook calculation. His hand lashed out one more time, flat-palmed and vicious, the kind of shove he'd built a life on. And again, it died. Chuck's fingers closed around the wrist like a hinge, turned the arm an inch, and the man's own momentum sent him quarter-turn into the booth. His balance held, but just barely. He stood there breathing hard, red creeping into his neck. "Breathe," the owner said again from behind the counter. It was meant for both. It landed on one. The suited man shook his head violently, trying to shed the weight pressing down on him. "You think you can humiliate me?" His words had no air left. He looked at the waitress, searching for an easier target. If she had done her job— "Stop," Chuck said. It wasn't volume. It was a wall. The man froze in the middle of the sentence. His jaw twitched, pride splintering. Chuck leaned closer, calm and unshakable. "This is you," he said. "You did this. You can undo it with 2 words." The man's eyes flicked around the diner. Phones, truckers, families, kids. The witnesses weren't neutral anymore. They were a mirror. He saw himself in their eyes, and didn't like what stared back. His throat worked, but the words wouldn't come. He twitched again, that little tell of a man about to push. By the door, the bell jingled softly. The delivery boy had let it go, as if even the door wanted to record what came next. The suited man set his jaw, drawing a final breath through his teeth. "All right," he hissed. "Let's go for real." He lunged, and the room, packed to the walls with people, tilted toward something it could never unsee. He lunged the way men do when they've run out of words. Both hands drove forward, elbows stiff, shoulders hunched, the body language of someone who's used to shoving their way through life. It didn't land. Chuck shifted half a step, barely more than the swing of a pendulum. His palms touched the wrists and rotated them, not violently, just enough to send the man's weight into the booth instead of his chest. The suited man hit the padded edge with a jolt that rattled the glassware. The diner didn't cheer. It sighed. A collective exhale, a release of pressure. The man sprang back, face flushed, jacket crooked. "Again!" he barked, voice breaking under the strain. He faked left, reached for Chuck's shoulder. A simple trick, brute force packaged as skill. Chuck didn't resist. His hand guided the elbow and the rest of the arm followed. The man found himself twisted, hip-bumping laminate, sugar packets scattering across the table. A ripple of reaction moved through the room. Kids whispered. A trucker muttered, "Hell, that was clean." Phones hovered higher, screens reflecting disbelief. The suited man gritted his teeth, hair falling into his eyes. "Stop playing!" he shouted. "Do it for real!" Chuck's tone stayed level. "This is real. And I'm giving you a way out." That only stoked the fire. "Hurting me? You couldn't hurt me if you tried." He charged again, hands clawing for Chuck's collar. The attempt died before it started. Chuck's fingers brushed along his forearm, and the grab unraveled, leaving the man with his wrist pointing uselessly at the wall. For a heartbeat, he stood trapped by his own momentum. Then Chuck eased him back, like returning a book to a shelf. The room erupted this time. Applause, whistles, gasps. The crowd had stopped being spectators. They were participants now, the third force in the diner. Some clapped, others scolded the noise, but nobody looked away. The man's face burned. He looked at the phones, at the waitress, at Chuck. Desperation made his voice thin. "Enough tricks! Hit me! If you're a man, hit me!" Chuck shook his head slowly. "I don't hit weaker men." "But you're asking for a lesson?" The waitress felt her chest tighten. She realized her fear had shifted into something stranger. hope. She set her order pad down on the table and let her hands fall to her sides. For the first time, she didn't feel like the smallest person in the room. The man pointed at her, spitting words. She's the problem. If she'd done her job, stop. Chuck's single word shut it down. No heat, no volume, just a wall he couldn't walk through. The man froze, trembling with frustration. His pride had no room left to stand. You think you can humiliate me? You're humiliating yourself, Chuck said. He looked him dead in the eyes. And you can end it with 2 words. The room leaned forward, phones steady, plates forgotten. The silence had become unbearable, like a drumbeat before a strike. The man's mouth twisted. He tried for a smile, but found nothing to hang it on. His hand twitched again, the same nervous tell before every shove. He was going to push once more, because it was all he knew. Chuck sighed, shoulders settling. Last exit, he said quietly. The words seemed to echo off every wall. The man shook his head violently, sweat on his temple. Do something, he hissed, voice cracking under its own weight. If you won't hit me, You'll stop, Chuck interrupted, calm but final. Or I'll make you stop without hurting you. The suited man's chest heaved. He was out of tricks, out of words. His pride demanded one last gamble. His whole body bunched like a spring. And Chuck moved. Not fast, not flashy. Just a short, precise shift. Shoulder dropping, hand sliding into the perfect line. The entire diner held its breath as the final act began. Chuck didn't square his stance or rear back. He shifted just enough, his shoulder dropping, his palm cutting a short line forward. No show, no flourish, just the kind of motion you almost miss until it lands. The heel of his hand pressed into the man's ribs, right where breath hides. A dull sound carried through the diner, soft as a book closing. The suited man's expression went blank for a heartbeat before his knees folded. He dropped onto one knee, hand braced on the floor, air stolen from his chest. Silence pinned the room. No applause, no laughter, only the scrape of a fork against a plate, and the faint bell of the door settling from a draft. The crowd stared, phones raised, but still, as if recording wasn't enough to explain what they'd just seen. Chuck stepped aside, leaving space. His hands were open, palms loose, his posture calm. He hadn't celebrated, hadn't even breathed faster. The waitress pressed a hand to the booth behind her. She realized she wasn't shaking anymore. The order pad lay abandoned on the table. She watched the man kneeling, saw the pride drain out of him faster than color from his face. He pulled for breath, ragged and shallow, eyes darting. Everywhere he looked, he found witnesses: the cook at the counter, the truckers, the kid half hidden behind a menu. None of them sneered. Worse, they looked finished with him. "Look at me," Chuck said. His voice wasn't raised, but it cut through everything. The man's eyes lifted, caught, and couldn't turn away. "Respect isn't a trick," Chuck said. "It's knowing when not to use what you've got." His tone was flat, almost weary. "You don't speak to her like that. Not now. Not ever again." The suited man swallowed, his throat working like gravel. He tried to form words but failed. Chuck didn't move closer, didn't press. He let the silence do the work. "2 words," Chuck said at last. "That's all." The man shifted, tried to stand, wavered, then forced himself up. He looked at the waitress. Shame warped his voice. "I'm sorry." The second word caught, but it left his mouth. She didn't smile. She didn't mock him. "Okay," she said simply. And that landed harder than a cheer. The diner loosened. People breathed again, shifting in seats, lowering their phones. A boy near the window let out a laugh that sounded more like relief than humor. Chuck slid a bill under the salt shaker, added cash on top without checking the total. A habit, not a performance. The waitress blinked through tears, whispering, "Thank you." "You handled it," Chuck said, and she believed him because he said it like fact, not comfort. He turned toward the door. The bell gave a clean, single chime as he stepped out into the sun. For a second, the room stared at the glass rectangle where he'd been, as if expecting a second act. None came. The suited man lowered himself into his seat, hands steadying around a glass of water the owner had set down. He drank, shoulders slumping. The owner offered him the menu like it was any other lunch. "If you're still hungry," he said, "we can get it right." The man nodded once. "Please." The word seemed to cost him, but it came out. The waitress tore up the old ticket and wrote a new one, her handwriting firm, the pencil steady. She tucked the slip from the salt shaker into her apron, a line of handwriting visible at the bottom. "Be kind to yourself, too." No signature. Life resumed. Coffee poured, plates slid, a truck downshifted outside. The tension didn't vanish. It settled, like dust after a storm, covering every surface with the memory of what had happened. By evening, the video would scatter across town, maybe further. Some would argue it was staged. Others would swear they felt the silence through the screen. But the people in the diner knew better. They'd seen a man stopped without being broken, and they'd seen respect taught in the plainest way possible. Inside, the waitress stood taller. She rolled her shoulders back and felt them settle differently, as if she'd inherited some of the stillness left behind. Outside, Chuck walked down the street, boots marking a quiet rhythm nobody else could hear. And the story, like silence itself, would travel without needing permission.